So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in today, because actually you're giving up some time to hear about the programme is a real measure of your commitment to wanting to understand more about how we create these more compassionate and more inclusive cultures in the NHS. So I am Katy Steward, and I am head of the Culture and Transformation team. And we run the National Programme for Culture and Leadership. It's a programme which Michael has said has got quite deep roots. But what I want to do today is to just share really a very few comments about our observations from having implemented the programme, and also to try and make this, even this very short session, interactive. We will be going into a conversation with Maggie Oldham, the Chief Executive, who has used the Culture and Leadership Programme to develop her culture and to be far more intentional, if you like, about the kind of culture that she wants to create in the Isle of Wight. And I should just also say now that Tracy Taylor has been hugely important in helping us to shape this session, but unfortunately is no longer able to join us. But please continue to put your questions in the chat, and those questions we'll come back to when we get into the conversation with Maggie. So the Culture and Leadership Programme, just in very headline terms, is a programme for organisations to create cultures that are more compassionate and more inclusive, and also more collective. So it has very deep roots. It was co-designed, if you like, by the King's Fund, NHS Improvement, and the Centre for Creative Leadership. It was piloted in 3 organisations, and we have used it in now around 30 organisations who have used it intensively, using the majority of the tools and honouring the conceptual framework which it's based around. We're also really lucky to have benefited from an evaluation by the University of Manchester Alliance, Manchester Business School, and the University of Birmingham into the programme. And what we've heard from all of that is that the programme works because it is evidence-based. It brings an external perspective into organisations on their culture, and it provides a semi-structured process, so it's in 4 phases, which allows organisations to get started. But why? Why does it help in changing culture? And we don't know all of the answers to that, but that is something which we're really interested in finding out more about and in learning more about. And so what I want to do today is to just share a couple of things which I think, and which I think we all agree, have got some bearing on what it is that makes behaviours change, what it is that makes the way that we do things around here a little bit different. And so I'm just going to say a very brief words about staff engagement, and especially about the importance of listening to staff, about the importance of having a practical plan, and particularly about being really direct on inclusion, and just share with you some findings that it appears that the programme does have an impact on culture, and we suspect that that might be linked to there being a very clear direction from the top of the organisation and support by senior leadership. So, to go to listening and staff engagement, we know that one of the most important things for culture change is staff engagement. And allow me to define what that means for our programme. It means, and we observe, staff being listened to, being noticed, being able to talk about issues, concerns in an environment in which they feel safe. And it feels that one of the things about the credibility of this programme is that it does allow for a greater sense of safety. That when staff talk about their experiences of the workplace in the change team, and they're really listened to, and there is real understanding based on data, then they feel that it is all right to raise these issues and raise these concerns. And another feature of the programme is that participation is somehow, because it is above and beyond, staff enjoy participating in this programme because it is doing something different. It is creating culture, it is creating values, it's working with how do we create a culture of care, one in which we all want to come to work each day. And what we saw during COVID was that our change teams became recovery teams. Staff listening, empathising, what is the data telling us about whereabouts during this incredibly difficult time? There are areas for us to help relieve anxiety, stress, and support staff more. So I said I wanted to make this interactive, and I would like to launch a question on Menti. Shana, are you able to put that up for us? So do go ahead and put your questions, enter the code into, go on to menti.com for those of you who haven't. Aha, fantastic. So the question is, who needs in your organisation should be involved in culture change? Everyone. Role model led from the top. Everyone but needs to be led from the top and very intentional. Middle managers, everyone. Absolutely. We know that when organisations get engagement from all staff groups, then there is much more support for the culture change. So there is, that is one area where we think that the programme, because it has this focus on change teams, on workshops, on using culture tools to discover and understand the culture, there is the opportunity for staff to feel much more engaged in much more engaged in the future. So the second point I want to make very briefly is that we are going to do much more on equity and inclusion. And whilst listening is incredibly important, it's not enough. We also have to have leadership which takes a real commitment to act. And you may be thinking at this stage that a commitment to act is something which is very difficult to do around culture, that culture is rather nebulous, that it doesn't lend itself to management plans. But actually our experience, and I think one of the great strengths of this programme, is that it does take people from understanding the culture to developing a detailed plan about what it can do and whereabouts in the organisation there is the opportunity to strengthen the culture. But we are discovering that we have to be much more direct on equity and inclusion. That organisations who have followed the Compassion programme haven't gone very far in terms of creating actionable strategies around inclusion, equity, diversity. And we have a role, I think, to help create much more practical strategies. Is there a vision in this organisation where people really believe that the vision for the organisation is to be inclusive, whether working in systems and as a trust? Are the right things being measured in this organisation so that we can be transparent? Do we know if development is effective? Do we measure the right things in order to know whether our development at team level, senior level, board level is effective in terms of working with inclusion and equity? And all my experience is that, and I've worked fairly deeply in the oil industry, but also in the humanitarian sector, is that organisations find it really difficult to be self-critical. All organisations. And that we have to help organisations to be far more practical. We have to help organisations to be far more direct in their dealing with equity and inclusion. And so we invited Professor West to do a review of the programme with a view to identifying a development in the programme so that we could do much more around equity and inclusion. And he has developed the architecture of the programme so that we have a new cultural element. And that means that a lot of our data a lot of the tools will be are being designed so that we can gather more data, which will be helpful for organisations in terms of creating a strategy for going forward. Shana, I don't know if you could replace this Menti question with the next one, please. Okay, fantastic, thank you. So my final point, and I said I was just going to talk very briefly, is that I wanted to start with a question. And the question I wanted to ask was, would you expect to see a measurable change in culture from doing the programme and changing the culture? Yes. Yes. Sometimes no. Charlotte, could you share the next slide? So So what this slide tells us, and I just want to say that this is early days for us in terms of analysing the staff survey results and the impact of the Culture and Leadership Programme on the staff survey results. What it suggests is that in very simple terms, that heavy users of the Culture and Leadership Programme, by which we mean those that use all of the tools and are somehow loyal to both the intention built into the programme to listen, providing real leadership from senior levels, and honouring the conceptual framework of the programme. What this shows is that those organisations who are heavy users of the programme have a greater impact on their staff survey scores, specifically around these areas of the cultural elements. So the cultural elements, which the staff survey groups are around ED&I, relationship with managers, engagement, quality of care, safety culture, bullying and harassment, and health and well-being. And that the impact is greater than those who are light users of the programme. And the light users of the programme have a greater impact on their staff survey results than those who are non-users of the programme. And not only is it more of an impact, but also the results are less variable. So those who haven't used the programme are perhaps more likely for their staff culture scores to slide back. So we think that there are some important features around using the programme, and some of those are around the role of senior leadership and whether there is a clear direction from the top around the importance of the programme and a real commitment by the senior leaders and by the board to work with what the purpose of the programme might be. So in one of the changes that we've made in the updated guidance that we're going to talk about in a little while is to put more focus on what we now call the scoping phase, which is an opportunity for the board and for senior leaders to engage around what is the purpose of this programme. And some trusts have been very, very, very intentional about the purpose of the programme. How will running the culture programme help us to be a learning organisation? How can we benchmark whether we are in the top 25% of organisations for culture? How do we dovetail our improvement programme with our culture change? So we know that there's a huge amount of variation in terms of how trusts use the programme, and also that we're about to enter a new phase in which, as trusts work as part of systems, they play with the programme and use different facets of it. But I just wanted to surface those three issues, and that brings us to our next session, which is with Maggie Oldham. And I will allow Maggie to introduce herself.